I guess I have to press got it.
Again.
John, we're recording. I think it'll be all right. They typically use the recording to do minutes. They'll be all right.
All right. I will call the North Walk November 8th meeting to order. Do roll call. We have Lisa Cooper, David Westmoreland, myself, Mary Peniston, and Kelly Bloom. No public to participate, if I'm correct. So we'll go on to item 4, administration. And I'll ask for the approval of the minutes of the September 13th, 2022 meeting. Unless anyone has some changes or want to correct anything. Seeing none, I'll ask for the motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Okay, seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to financials. Approve the North Walk Housing Corporation Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and balance sheets for all funds for year-to-date September 30th, 2022. Eugenia.
Yes. Okay, the hold on. Okay. So for the quarter ending September 30th, Fund 400 had $1,857 in revenue and $305 of expenses, which resulted in a net operating surplus of $1,553. And then the balance sheet for this fund had assets of $785,000 and liabilities and net assets of $785,000. The North Walk revolving loan fund had $672 in a net operating surplus, which is mostly from interest income from notes. And this fund's balance sheet had $130,000 in assets and $130,000 in liabilities and net assets. And that's it.
Okay. Any questions, observations? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for September.
So
Do
moved.
I have a motion? Okay,
Second.
sounds like Kelly, seconded by Lisa. All in favor?
Aye.
I have no business or new business to discuss. Does anyone else want to just bring up anything? Any questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion. Okay, all in favor? Aye. We've adjourned the North Walk meeting. I will now call to order the Norwalk Redevelopment November 8th, 2022 regular meeting. Called that to order, the roll call, the same participants. We have Mary Peniston, Kelly Bloom, Lisa Cooper, David Westmoreland, and myself, John Igneri. Also attending are Eugenia Lipinski, Ryan Bedoli, and Katie. No public to participate again, or we'll go to item 4. Will somebody make the motion to approve the minutes from the September 13th, the October 4th, and the October 17th special meetings?
John, I have a question. I wasn't there for one of the meetings, so should I abstain on the one I wasn't there for?
You don't have to. If you'd like to, though, you can. So
That means you'd have to go one by one, so I don't know.
sure, we can do one by one. Have a motion. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 13th regular meeting? David's, Lisa's seconds. Any changes? No? Everything's good, so I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous? No. And now we have the minutes of the October 4th, 2022 special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
John, the only thing is just a minor thing. She had spelled my name Copper instead of Cooper on the October 4th. It was under section A. David had made a motion and I seconded it, and she just put Copper instead of Cooper.
Okay, we will correct that. So do we have a motion to approve it, unless there are other changes? David, seconded by Lisa. All in favor? Aye.
And I abstain.
I abstain as well.
2 abstentions, 3 approvals. Approve the minutes of the October 17th, 2022 special meeting. We have a motion. Mary moves it. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Any changes? Nope, no corrections. All in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Unanimous? Next, we'll go on to item B, the financials, to approve the redevelopment agency's statement of revenues and expenditures and balance sheets for all funds for year to date September 30th. And Virginia, you're on again.
Okay. For the quarter ended September 30th, the operating fund 100 had actual revenue of $362,000 versus a budget of $357,000, resulting in a $6,000 favorable variance. Total operating expenditures of $424,000 versus budgeted expenses of $439,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $15,000. This is due to a favorable variance in personnel expenses of $22,000, offset by an unfavorable variance in administrative expenses of $7,000. Legal fees of about $20,000 were paid to Shipment for 1517 Chestnut Street, and these expenses should be reimbursed to the agency by Spinnaker once the land disposition agreement is signed. The actual operating deficit of $62,000 versus a budgeted operating deficit of $82,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $20,000.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the revenue and expenditures balance sheet.
John, do you want me to,
Go on?
do you want me to go on with the balance sheet or?
Sure, I'm sorry, I thought,
Okay. The balance sheet for Fund 100 at September 30th had $4,620,000 in cash, accounts receivable due to other funds, property and right of use asset, and $1,648,000 in net loans receivable. And there's a $410,000 balance in deferred revenues, which will be earned when expended, and $3,362,000 in net assets. The financial statements for the other funds are also included in this package. There are no major variances except the CDBG non-revolving loan fund 300 had an operating deficit of $166,000, which was drawn down and reimbursed in October. And then Fund 500 programs had a $92,000 operating deficit, which will be break even after grants are billed and reimbursed.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry for pushing you along so quickly.
No problem.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the statement of revenues, expenditures, and the balance sheet? David, seconded by Mary. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Now we'll move on to item 5, business. A, presentation of the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency internal control policies and procedures. Brian, is this what we're going to discuss in executive session?
No, this is well, it's somewhat related, but this is more the internal policies with procurement that we're going to talk about.
Okay,
Yeah, so a couple months ago, I know the chairman had noted that we were going to look at the agency policies and just kind of do some cleaning up. There's a few things that kind of are operated by practice as opposed to actual written procedure. So we did an audit of that. I mean, you know, we all, when I first came into this position, we redid the employee handbook. So I'm pretty good in that regard. We had a consultant help us with that and get that adopted. Have been a couple things though that I think affect our internal control document more than anything that I'm going to present tonight. One of the reasons why we were a little delayed, we had talked about this in the summer, but we were actually undergoing a HUD monitoring. So every so often HUD actually chooses a number of its CDBG communities to audit effectively. So during August, we had about a 2-week-long audit of all of our procedures. So we wanted to wait to see what sort of outcomes and potential changes that we might need to make as a result of that would be required. I just sent you a letter that wasn't included in the agenda, but I'm actually going to share it here too. It's actually it's a good report card. So we're pretty happy that we're actually not going to have to make any changes in regards to HUD.
Oh, good.
What they basically they identified is that, you know, they looked at all our financial procedures, looked at our internal controls, they conducted interviews with our auditors and everybody. This is for just administration of our CDBG revenue specifically. And they identified no findings and said, you know, and specifically noted we have a productive program and they were happy with our performance. So I just wanted to share that with you just as it pertains to, you know, an important role we play for the city. I shared this with the Economic and Community Development Committee members as well and the mayor. But our program passed muster, and just thanks to Eugenia and all her hard work to make sure that that occurs, as well as Steve and Ivan at our office. They do a great job working with our consultants, and we all work together to kind of make this happen. But I'm definitely appreciative that we didn't have any findings to actually have to deal with. So it's always good from that perspective. That said, there were a couple things that we know that we wanted to kind of address internally. Can you see my screen with some track changes in red here?
yes, I
Okay.
can.
So this is our internal control document. It's pretty bulleted and straightforward. It's included in your agenda, so you have the full version of it. You know, with our relatively small finance department, it's always important to make sure that we have a clear separation of duties. You know, Eugenia handles the finance director duties, and Lena from our office handles accounts payable. So there's opportunities for them to work together to have some clear separation of duties. Me being the third party, there's a couple things that the auditor recommended that Eugenia do, just for you know, good measure and clean accounting procedures. And one of those is actually referenced here, is just in terms of you know, when the payroll is issued, when bank reconciliations occur, that they're actually sent to me as well, so that we're, you know, have different sets of eyes on it. It's not just containing Eugenia. So Eugenia has been doing this. We just wanted to write it down. And I think it's important to at least have a stated procedure, as we kind of talked about. So that's one of the edits. The other edit is in regards to our procurements. So it's the second one right here. We had obviously before saying that, you know, we should do competitive solicitations when applicable. You know, one of the interesting things about our organization is we're funded from so many different sources. There's so many different procurement requirements. We're constantly doing a dance to figure out, you know, how best for purchasing. But I just kind of wanted to clarify that and put that in stone. So for instance, when we have city capital funds, we defer to the city's procedure. When we are working with, for instance, a DECD grant or state grant, we typically just defer to DECD's procurement. We kind of are nimble in that regard, and it's worked. And I think that, you know, they all have their respective policies, but I just wanted to lay that out clearly. Also, the one more substantive change is in terms of purchasing limits. The first bit is not a change in terms of standard operating procedure. When I took over, you know, I was told, you know, I had the authority to enter into contracts up to the $5,000 procurement threshold. That wasn't written anywhere, but it's in line with the city's sort of policy in terms of for bids. But in terms of me being able to do that, I wanted to just put that in writing. There's a few things that, you know, this is obviously within the context of an approved budget, so not expending outside of our existing budget. That would come back to the board for another for implementation or a policy budget change. But I just put that in writing here. But one of the things that we've noticed, particularly with the facade improvement program, sometimes there's these emergency situations where they're asking for, and we'll talk about it a little bit later tonight, one specific instance of that project, say it's $10,000 to build a wall. And this is a project that's actually approved by the city. It's not really approved by our board. The money is the city's money in this instance, but I am a little bit tied in terms of being able to sign that based on under that $5,000 procurement threshold. So what I'm suggesting is up to the next procurement level, which is $20,000. Anything above that is going to require an RFP, and obviously, as we're going to talk about tonight, some contract oversight by the full board. Is that there's an element where we can actually approve contracts and expenditures up to that $20,000 threshold, as authorized by the agency chairman. I assume that there'd probably be some consultation that could occur with you all separately, but just outside of a formal meeting. So that's for consideration and discussion as one specific change. And I think other than that, that is it specifically for this item. I'm happy to take any questions.
Is everyone okay with this suggestion here, the $20,000 limit that Brian and I can approve? There's silence. Sounds like they're okay with it. Any other questions about this?
Thank you for being so thorough.
I was just thinking, you're permitted to and authorized up to $5,000 per individual contract. The way things are going, that could be a tank of gas in your car.
Exactly. Doesn't get, that's the thing. It doesn't get us very far. So
So I'm fine with it. Everyone, if everyone else is, let's go on to the next item. Any other questions? It's okay. Good. Going on to item B, the South Norwalk Investment Program. Brian?
great. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up here. I got to shift screens. All right. So I think, a number of you were part of the Martin Luther King Corridor Initiative kickoff that we did. As part of that, $3 million was allocated through DECD to the city of Norwalk for facade improvements throughout the MLK corridor. It's somewhat of an interesting situation because really we're serving as the administrating agent of the city's money. This is the city's grant. It's not really our grant. And it's projects really selected through that group and internal to staff. Will be basically evaluating and selecting these projects. So it doesn't really require a board action because it's technically their money. So whatever, the city is comfortable doing, we're just really there to help administer. And we're actually getting administration fees for that. So basically what this action would do, and it goes to what I just talked about in terms of having the contractual authorization to sign these agreements that are outside of our typical board approval process, would allow me to sign contracts related to this program based on the city's recommendation is what I'm specifically asking for tonight. The one thing that I will caveat is that I still, and I've discussed this with the city, that we will still retain oversight and voting authority over loans, just because there's a number of underwriting criteria that we're going to be using our loan guidelines for. So I did not want to, circumvent that because we're ultimately responsible for making sure that these people are vetted and we have a liability there. So the loan aspect of it, which is $500,000 of the total money, and I should clarify, I apologize, $3 million was the total DECD grant used for a number of projects. $1.25 million is allocated for facade improvements, and $750,000 of that is the grant. $750,000 of that is from the DECD grant. And the other $500,000 is from the GGP money that came from the construction of the mall. So the $500,000 from GGP is going to be used for loans that we'll still have some oversight on. And the $750,000 is for grants, which you would be authorizing me to sign those grant agreements as the projects come to fruition as part of the authorization tonight.
Can you give us an example or two of the facade improvements that are going on?
Yeah. So we have a number. Stephen just wrapped one where there was an emergency loan. This is actually to the point of the not a loan, emergency grant to a homeowner that needed a wall rebuilt that was kind of crumbling and falling down. I believe it was 7 Grove Street. But it's all throughout the MLK corridor. Other things like siding, roofing, windows, all things for neighborhood beautification throughout the MLK corridor. So we've done 8 to date. We're currently working on another 7. And we're just going to be trucking along probably about what my goal is to have at least 6 done per 6 months.
Okay. define the corridor.
Yeah, let me
Anything-
show you. I have the map up. I could share my screen real quick. You'll see that?
Yes,
It's in the packet as well. There's a write-up. This is reflective there, but this is the geography that was agreed upon by the MLK corridor committee.
all right, now I understand. Yep.
Brian, could I just ask for clarification? You said it's only that 750,000. That's the one where you have to move quickly for the grants, where the city has basically already approved it and you're just looking for the authority for administering it. Yes?
Yeah, and I think for this, it's not looking to spend the whole 750. We have about $177,000 in project right now, but just moving forward, so we're not encumbering the city in an administrative procedure that they really don't need to, take part of.
But the ones that are the loans, that would not be affected, correct? It's only that 750,000.
Correct. Yeah, I still want to bring the loans back to you all because we're going to be underwriting them, and I think we should have some administrative action since we're going to be the administering agent on the loan.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
Yeah, because we'll be responsible for vetting them, and you'll be taking a look within the context of our existing loan guidelines is the plan for that. But given liability and the spread, since we're managing it, I think we should all have our set of eyes on it.
Okay. Any other questions? Thoughts? None? Let's move on to item C. Digital transformation services.
All right, great. So this is actually a pretty
I'm
exciting
sorry,
project.
can I just interrupt for 1 second? Does the board have to take a vote for B for the South Norwalk?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Did we take a vote?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank goodness you're here tonight. Do I have a motion to authorize Brian Bedoli, Executive Director, to enter into any and all contracts related to the South Norwalk Investment Program? I can't.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded, I'll say by Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving along.
All right, great.
Brian, this item is to authorize the executive director to enter into contracts with DKSR as approved for digital transformation services.
All right, great. So can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this project actually came out of our work staffing the ad hoc sustainability and resilience committee. Some of my work when I was working in Germany with SAP was involved around smart and future cities. And we're talking about some of the benchmarking, specifically the indicators that the sustainability committee is interested in kind of taking a snapshot of Norwalk. So we could, looking at open space, looking at emissions, looking at all the sort of sustainability indicators and taking a snapshot now and then figuring out how we could track our performance over time. So I worked a lot in this regard when I was in Germany with a company, with actually the University of Stuttgart, and they had an initiative called Morgenstadt, which is translated to City of the Future. So I actually engaged with the lead there that was involved with that to see what kind of services that we could bring to Norwalk. There's not a lot of sort of lower level municipal service entities that kind of do this type of work, unless we're talking about a much larger sustainability project, which we also are doing with the city to do the climate action plan. But the committee is really interested in the meantime of getting things moving. So I spoke with them. What you're going to hear tonight is kind of a scope that we worked to develop because the individual that actually was involved with Morgenstadt actually spun off and created their own consulting firm in Germany for this, as well as general digitization services for cities. So when I actually was there, when I was there for my holiday, I went and met with him, sat down, talked about Norwalk, talked about sort of what we're looking to do, came back, spoke about it with the committee, spoke about it with Jess over in Community and Economic Development. And they said, well, maybe we should actually expand it a little bit because the city has this goal of going digital. There's a lot of things that we want to do that we maybe have sort of been impeded by our internal processes, and we might not be ready to just go straight into a solution. So what this company does actually is they perform needs assessments, and those are the two options for tonight. One is going to be around the topic of data governance, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And then the other is around the topic of use cases. And I think what we talked about the most the lowest hanging fruit in that regard is sustainability and mobility. So I won't go too in depth in the approach. I would have had him here, but I think it's about 2 a.m. there, or it's almost midnight there right now. So I didn't want to drag him out to this meeting. So I'll kind of fly the best I can. But basically what we sat down and had a number of meetings with them to talk about an approach. And what it would be is the first one around data governance is focus on the IT elements of the whole equation. So meeting with city IT, meeting with utility companies, meeting with water companies, seeing how that we use data and what are the restrictions and how's it working. Nothing in terms of implementing, just in terms of a conversation, a workshop, and some findings. That is really the focus of the first needs assessment will be kind of understand the status quo and what sort of potential may exist, as well as mapping our readiness for something like this, whether that's in the context of a use case like transportation or mobility. So I won't go too deep into here. There's a lot of fancy infographics and a lot of things that'll probably, give headaches to everyone. But you're welcome to read through it. And if you have any questions, let me know. One of the
Ryan,
nice
could I-
things.
Could
Yeah,
I
sorry.
just ask a quick question, which is, I did read through it, but I couldn't really grab onto the practicality of it. So even right now, when you were talking about the data governance, could you just give an example of what it might look like and enable you, what it might enable the city to do that it can't do now? I couldn't sort of grasp what the end product was.
Yeah, no problem. So the end product, just to answer that directly, is a needs assessment. It's a research document ultimately. I think one thing that we're trying to deal with is helping the city. And I don't know if you've read the efficiency study, basically saying that they're 2 to 3 decades behind the curve in terms of an IT and technology perspective. So really what the hope is to basically figure out what that specifically looks like in terms of being behind. So if you look here in these sort of categories in terms of the status quo assessment, that's the first step. These are some topical areas that I think is things that we could be looking at. And the whole point is that we're not doing it right now. We're trying to develop a plan effectively, develop at least some sort of identity around the existing conditions from a tech and IT perspective. So whether it's an administration, how to automate payments, how to better, support existing online services, how to increase communication with data, and how ready the city is to deploy these solutions. Because what you often see, and I've worked in this space on the private sector side, is people trying to sell solutions like, oh, I sold you an e-permitting system. I sold you a communication system, but there are these one-off things that don't typically work well for one another. They don't work well with each other. And it's kind of like shooting first and aiming later, I think is the way I would sort of talk about it. So what this is trying to like kind of take a higher level approach at this and figure out how we work with data and how we can best position ourselves to better utilize information that we're taking in as a municipality to implement, and to improve municipal function, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That's a very helpful context.
Great. So these are so these are some of the, if you want to reference this when you go back, these are the kind of specifics around what we could be doing. And this was what will feed some of the use cases that we're talking about in the second needs assessment. The other thing that with the sustainability committee, which I think is really interesting, this is something that they did with the Morgenstadt initiative that I was involved with at the University of Stuttgart, is they actually they look at 84 to I think it's like 120 international standard indicators of sustainability in a community, and they map it into like a graphic. So they're taking a look at your future viability around quality of life, resilience, the environment, innovation, and we're just kind of get a snapshot of where Norwalk is today. And where we could go is the idea to impart the discussion from there. So in order to do that, they'll be doing some desktop research, just looking in. We'll be doing interviews with us, expert interviews. Obviously, want to work with SNU, Eversource, the utility companies, because there's a lot of opportunity there for better monitoring. I'm sure you, David, are more aware of what you currently do, but I think it'll be definitely a part of the discussion. And then finding some use cases. So specifically like what we're leading towards, and I think we talked about sustainability and mobility, but we're going to take a higher level approach to make sure that those are indeed the ones that we think are the best to move forward. And then once we identify that, do another needs assessment on the specifics of mobility, or on the specifics of sustainability, or on the specifics of administration, on those areas, Mary, to your point. So really it's two efforts. The first one is scope for 15,000 euros, so $15,000 basically now with the exchange rate. And then the second is 18,750 euros for the multiple day workshops and all of that. The specific days are broken out. It's basically 1,250 euros a day that they're involved in prepping research. So it's fairly reasonable, and it's definitely below those procurement thresholds. And I've worked with Jess, and she's fully supportive of this. And I think what we're going to try to do is find a way to we'll use some city capital funds as well as some of the GGP money, because we're going to be taking a look at Wheels to You and figuring out how we could better kind of integrate that to provide better connectivity, between the mall, the train station, and Wall Street as part of this. And I think one of the other benefits that we're going to get out of this, for instance, is we're putting in for a grant through USDOT right now for smart cities. There's a lot more money coming available for that. And a lot of communities aren't positioned well to kind of chase that money. So even this proposal has helped us develop the grant application, which is due on November 18th. So I think it's a step in a direction that I know the mayor and the city is interested in going. There's already a lot of hurdles that we still need to address with IT in terms of making sure that we adhere to their protocols. Everyone's comfortable with this, but what I'm seeking tonight is just approval to utilize the funds around this concept. And there's still some negotiation needs to occur in terms of scope and involvement about various departments, but in terms of the price, that's set. So I know it's a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions or even have follow-up meetings from here.
Ryan, I know that data is like one of your specialties and it was in the plan. But could you describe a little bit more after you had this needs assessment? What tools will you have to work with? I mean, what will it position the city to do in terms of, does it give the beginnings of a roadmap to make some decisions about what to invest in for IT? And then on the mobility one, I'm not sure what it starts to position the city to do. And then could you just remind us again where the money's going to come from to pay for this?
Yep. I'll try to take it a step back to the first thing. So yes, to your point, it's what the outcome is a roadmap. It's similar, like a summary of findings report, a bunch of workshops, a bunch of discussions. Here's what we think the city is positioned to do. Here's the low hanging fruit, and here's the priorities in that regard. I think one of the things that I've experienced working on the private side, my job specifically as an urbanist in this setting was to help the IT people talk to the planners. I was that intermediary source, and this is what this gap fills. This is what this whole process fills. You have IT professionals that know their craft. They know how to set up SQL databases. They know it, but they don't know how planning works. And so it's really trying to find someone that understands both worlds, which this company specializes in, specifically for municipalities. So this isn't a solution. What's so interesting about DKSR is they're not a solution provider. They do an open source data platform that is it plays well with others, and they're not trying to sell the solution. They're trying to sell this process. So that's why they're not, it's not vested in that regard. And I think when you get, like, for instance, when I was working with SAP, I mean, we were trying to box people into our product. So everything was kind of guiding you to that point. So what we're really trying to do is have a sort of a third-party needs assessment that gives us that roadmap to these use cases. So specifically, like, what does that look like? Well, if we, for instance, with the South Norwalk TOD study, we have $6 million to improve around the train station, the infrastructure. One of the things is intelligent transportation systems. So people know when the train's coming or when the commuter shuttle is going to be coming. So that's the exact instance of, we don't have the framework yet to do that. That's something that the US DOT has on some of their things. When you see on the tracks, in 10 minutes it's coming, but local, when you hit the local streets, there's no information for people commuting to the train station. So we need to make sure, what this will do is help us identify those kind of gaps and recommend something on how best to go forward in the most practical sense. And then on the sustainability end of things too, it's one of the examples that he gave.
As soon as I got in.
Sorry, I got some background noise. One of the things that we talked about with the sustainability group is the tree initiative, right? So we're planting all these trees. There's all this money coming through ARPA to plant trees all around the city. One of the projects that they did in Germany was actually install drought sensors in the beds of trees, so that they were able to notify which tree needs to be watered at a certain time, therefore saving the tree and protecting the investment. So that's a data process that needs to occur, that needs to get mapped back to the city, to the DPW or parks, but that doesn't exist, right? So it's these frameworks that we're trying to identify and then figure out what best use cases, what are the low-hanging fruits to start in this journey is really what it would be.
And just another quick question then, you mentioned who's getting interviewed, but I'm just wondering about how you prioritize what variables get considered. I saw the map where you said with 104 for the sustainability, so that's their model, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
think it'll be through initial discussions and feedback. So we'll do an interview, we'll figure out who best we need to talk to, and then kind of it'll be an iterative process from there. I mean, we obviously have our ideas. We know the people that work with this kind of stuff. I mean, obviously the IT director, some of the department heads. I don't know what sort of IT infrastructure exists at the utility companies and the like, but those are the kind of people we're talking about.
Is it possible? I'm just be curious, especially with the sustainability one. I'd love to see what the 104 indicators are. Just be kind of interesting to see how they define it.
Yeah, I have the final report. I can't recall if it's an excerpt of them. I actually asked for the 80. There's like 84, at least.
Whatever it is, I'd just be curious to see what the variables are.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'll send you the report. It's really interesting stuff. I mean, it's a
Okay.
very, the reason why I like it, and I think it's a little different than I think a IT consultant would do, is they're trying to just benchmark you off of internet ISO standards. There's ISO standards for sustainable governance. There's ISO standards for, internationally accepted operation standards that we're going to look at and see how well we shake out. But I'll send it to you, Mary.
I guess just because, I really like all I think it's really good that it's open source and that they have a pretty robust model. But I always just like to check because has to be assumptions made. So I just want to be clear in terms of this model and getting an overview of what assumptions they're making. That's all. I'm just,
Yeah, no,
I'm
happy
sure it's
to
very
share it.
sophisticated. I'm sure it's very sophisticated, but I'm just curious what they're modeling around.
Yeah, and I could I'll send it to you for sure. You can see the detail. It's mostly environmental, economic, and equity, so social equity. So really, let's focus on sustainability. But things like PM 2.5 emissions, things like open space, and they map very specific data-driven metrics that are just research-based. So I'll send it to you though. And then we have the
Okay.
option to be compared to 30 German cities across Germany, but I don't know if we want to do this. I don't know how we're going to shake out. But it's really interesting that we're going to have a fresh perspective. It's going to be a little bit of a pilot, working with someone overseas. But I've worked with this person, and they're in this group for a long time. They have programmers on staff, they have urbanists, they have sustainability professionals. It's a very unique sort of organization. And we're looking forward to kind of testing the waters here.
Using your example of the sensors in the trees, that information has to get back to DPW. You noticed that deficiency. So does this program lay out the steps to follow to make sure that deficiency or that lack of communication is resolved?
That's the intent. I think it's going to be more identifying it, and then we're going to have to, then you figure out use cases from there in terms of implementation, and that's where we're going to need additional funding. This is really to identify those gaps. But I mean, we saw this in Ryan Park. I mean, all those trees kept dying. At the end of the day, we have to keep replanting them. And that costs money. So it's either you do it now and you do it right, or we have to keep doing it from a maintenance perspective moving forward. But this specific stage is just to identify those gaps, John. We'd have to do another engagement to figure out how to address them specifically.
Okay, so they would be telling us how to address it.
Yeah, but not like getting into the nitty gritty of, all right, this is, yeah, exactly.
You address it by having DPW monitor the sensors.
Right. As opposed to the next step is, okay, I'm going to program an open source platform to connect to the sensors, and then we're going to move in. That's going to be the next step, but they're going to tell us how to get there with the use cases.
Okay, got it.
Brian, could you say again who's paying, how this is going to be paid for?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was the third part of your question. So we're still working through the details with with Jess in terms of procurement and all that, but the way it's looking is half city capital and then half of the GGP money. So we can focus on some of those mobility things like Wheels to You. Improving commuter shuttles through this sort of integration.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody?
Drag everyone kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Okay. So we need a motion to authorize the executive director to enter into the contracts with DKSR. Do I have a motion to approve, for approval? No motions?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
seconded by David. All in favor? Aye. Approved.
And I'll
Brian,
let you know how the negotiations keep going. One of the things that we have to figure out is the IT security protocol, given the fact that they're overseas. So if anything happens, I'll keep you guys up to date in terms of the final negotiations with the firm.
And Brian, just one other question. Since some of this stuff will have regional implications,
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, will there be opportunities to share this with other cities or to think outside of just what's the purview of Norwalk?
absolutely. We actually already talked about that. And that's one of the most attractive things about the open source platform that they're talking about. And it's quite literally they give the code. You know, we're happy if we could figure out something that works, working with WestCog, working with MetroCog, feeling, you know, I was very involved in setting up the GIS, regional GIS program at MetroCog. So I think there's a conversation to be had there. And then also WestCog, I know has one. If we could figure out how to integrate and expand and help support the other towns, I think, yes, absolutely.
Brian, is this like an ongoing process or like, do you have a deadline of when you want to have things completed?
Yeah, for the needs assessment, it's going to be, you know, there's a defined term. I think it's, you know, 20 days, probably we'll wrap it in a month and a half. And then moving forward, we're going to have to figure out what that looks like. But yeah, this kind of stuff is always an ongoing process. You know, it's like, it's you're setting on a journey right now. And this is sort of the first step.
So do you have any sense of what it might cost down the road to do other steps? I mean, it seems interesting just to see what they come back with.
Right.
Do you have any sense of what the range is to get what you want to get out of it, what you might have to spend?
It's going to be hard for me to estimate in any good faith right now because I don't know specifically what we're scoping, you know, and I think we need this to be able to have that conversation, to be honest, to figure out a order of magnitude, order and scale and magnitude of what we're even talking about here. And it's going to be all department based. You know, if people are interested in one thing, they may want certain things, and DPW may be more in tune to it than, say, you know, whoever. There's probably going to be variance among the departments, but I think the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And I think that's the sort of approach that we're trying to at least paint a low resolution picture of the elephant right now. If that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Did we approve this, or was there another question?
Yeah, I think we're good.
We're good. So, any new business or old business we want to discuss? If not, I will ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Anyone? So moved. I will second it. All in favor going into executive session?
Aye.
Okay. Good night, Katie. I can't.
I will note for the person doing the minutes, I'll note the time we enter back in.